O'er the wild windy sea, I can hear her calling to me. So let's heave away, haul away, and fill our eyes with the shore. Calls to friends, sail and light, and a tale to brighten the night. So heave away, haul away, and heed the siren song. Hello, welcome to The Salty Siren. I'm Jack, and I am joined by my co-host, David Bradbury.
Hello.
And today, we're coming at you with some more naval history. And this topic was kind of chosen on a whim by me, but I am excited. It is about Jacques Cousteau and his ship, the Calypso.
Very interesting. Well, it is good to get back to actual naval topics. We've had sussy imposters, and then I decided to just talk about narrowboats for a while. But admittedly, I know absolutely nothing about Jacques Cousteau or the Calypso, so I am excited for you to learn me something.
Well, that's good, because I didn't really know anything about Jacques Cousteau either.
Okay, solid.
I'll say it at the end, or I had it at the end in my notes, but the reason I chose this topic, or I thought of it, is the song Calypso by John Denver.
Okay, solid.
Yeah, both my parents are fans of John Denver, and that's just been played around me a fair amount, so I just have fond memories of it.
Yeah, I can't say that I've ever really listened to John Denver, like, at all.
He's good. He's very folksy and very wholesome.
Wait, is John Denver Mother Mountain?
Yeah, he is.
Okay, so I do know John Denver. All right.
Yeah.
At some point, we may explain Mother Mountain, dear listeners, but not right now. All right.
For a
Go
later
ahead.
time.
All right. Well, I'm ready whenever you are. Hit me with some Calypso knowledge.
To kick us off, let's talk about some background for Jacques Cousteau.
Mm-hmm.
So, in case anyone listening doesn't know who Jacques Cousteau is, he's easily one of the most, if not the most famous oceanographers / marine conservationists / marine explorer ever, at least in the modern age.
I knew his name sounded familiar, and maybe that's why I've heard it in passing in like nature documentaries or something.
Yeah, you've definitely heard his name. He is quite famous. What got him to being so famous, he was involved in the development of the modern day aqualung, which is basically a device that allows divers to swim freely underwater for extended periods of time. And he was also involved with a lot of other useful diving inventions. He was just very involved in that field.
Well, speaking of like classic music, though, do you know the song Aqualung?
I don't.
Oh man, Jethro Tull. My dad would always tell me that like Jethro Tull was the like cool rock band to listen to when he was in college. But anyway, I think it's like their most popular song is called Aqualung, and I always had no idea what Aqualung or Aqualung was, but now I know.
I think it's a regulator or some type of regulator that controls pressure coming from a diving tank or something like that.
Yeah, never would have guessed that by the song, but continue.
Yes, and so that kind of kicked off his career. He was also in the military, and uh, he was actually a part of the French Resistance, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
He has some history there. But definitely what made him the most famous is he's made a ton of shows and movies throughout his life. And he's just a very driven and business savvy person as well. He has founded numerous organizations in fields like manufacturing, marketing, and research. And a lot of these organizations congealed into what would become the Cousteau Society, which is his main deal, and they're big in obviously marine conservation and research. And
so like the Speedwagon Foundation in JoJo's, but real and not at all that.
You know, now that you say that, Jacques Cousteau is kind of a real life Speedwagon. He is just involved in so many things in so many ways.
Okay, so I wasn't too far off.
No, you're not, really not. But long story short, he's contributed a lot to society. A productive member of society.
Unlike ourselves.
So, with that background out of the name, and honestly, we could do a whole episode about Jacques Cousteau, and I think we should. I want to be more well prepared for that if we were to do that. So
yeah, sure.
So today we're just going to talk about his famous ship, the Calypso. So, the Calypso is named after the Greek mythological character, and Calypso, the character, is a nymph who held the Greek hero Ulysses captive on an island, on the island of Gozo for 10 years. I don't remember anything else about that story, but there it is.
Okay, fair.
In the early life of the ship, classified J-862, Calypso was originally a British Royal Navy minesweeper. She was christened in 1942 and was soon converted into a ferry after World War II and renamed Calypso. She's a 138-foot long vessel, and she has a wooden hull.
Interesting. Okay. Now, the only thing that I know about like minesweepers of that era was just the HMS Porcupine, which I'll just interject here because it's an incredibly short story. Basically, it was sweeping for mines, and it found one by running into it. And so it got blown the fuck in half, but they managed to haul both halves back to port, and they made them into two separate ships, the HMS Pork and the HMS Pine.
That's funny.
It is pretty good, but like that's basically the whole story. So anyway, it got turned into a ferry.
I guess that's one way to detect a mine.
Boss, we found it.
Yeah, I'll be honest, a wooden hull would not be my first choice for a war vessel, but that's just me.
Well, I think if memory serves, a lot of those old like sea mines were magnetic, and so if I imagine a wooden hull would help sort of combat that somewhat, but I could just be talking out of my ass, so I'll stop so that we can get back to the actual, like, we've researched this part.
Well, if you'll allow me to talk out of my ass,
Okay.
I know a lot of sea vessels use galvanized steel, which is non-ferrous. Right. But we digress. It has a wooden hull.
Fun little detour, though.
Yeah. So Calypso was an ideal ship for Jacques Cousteau and his plan to explore the seas. She left from the shipyard in Antibes, France, where she was transformed into an oceanographic ship, and the new Calypso was born. One of her interesting innovations is her quote-unquote false nose. If you look at the ship in dry dock, on her prow, there's a rounded protrusion right at the tip of the ship, just below the waterline. And this is called a bulbous bow. And this is something a lot of ships have. A bulbous bow basically modifies the way that water flows around the hull of a ship, and it reduces drag, and it reduces drag and thus reduces speed, or increases speed.
We'll get there.
Okay. It reduces drag, therefore increasing speed, range, fuel efficiency, and stability.
Okay. So to kind of help me and our readers, Jesus Christ, our listeners visualize, like I know large modern like cargo vessels have that sort of like below the waterline kind of like large, it's almost like the front of the ship is kind of like a letter C with like the bottom jutting out again. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's like the head of a beluga whale, but on the very tip of the ship, just below the waterline.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I had always wondered why that was there, but yeah, that's that question answered.
Yeah, it increases the efficiency of a ship by like 15 or 16%. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a pretty sizable number.
The interesting thing about the bulbous bow on the Calypso was that it was modified to be an underwater observation deck and has 8 portholes for viewing.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah, so just picture you had to be prone to crawl into it, but they just stuck windows all around it so you could look around underwater. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I had always wanted... Oh, sorry. But I had always wanted to ride in those... They used to do like ferry tours and stuff where like the bottom of the ship was just completely clear and you could see into the water below you. And I always thought that would be such an interesting experience. So it's good to know that the designers of the Calypso thought the same.
Yeah, I know that's a big deal in places like the Caribbean. Those super clear lagoons where you can ride around and look at the sharks.
Right.
But continuing on, a lot of the equipment for this ship was privately donated by various companies, as well as the French Navy. Cousteau and his wife Simone also devoted a lot of their personal resources to the ship. And on November 24th, 1951, Calypso set out on her first major adventure. She sailed to the Red Sea to study corals, and the team, while there, recorded very valuable topographical and photographic documentation, and they brought back samples of undiscovered flora and fauna.
So even on the first one, it's like, ooh, we discovered new shit.
Yeah. And for people that don't know, the Red Sea is a geographical oddity. It is extremely rich in corals and different marine life. I can't remember why. Maybe the way it's protected from the two seas, I'm not sure, but the Red Sea is a big deal in oceanography. After this successful voyage, Cousteau was convinced that there was only one solution for understanding the seas. Quote, "We must go see for ourselves," end quote.
Good one, Cousteau. We must go see.
He winked at his wife really hard when he said that.
Yeah, and then, because he's French, added several ahs after.
Some other exciting discoveries, including this, well, the Calypso will discover a lot of things in her life, but some of the more notable ones. In July of 1952, so not long after their Red Sea voyage, Calypso was an instrumental tool for studying a shipwreck from the 3rd century BC off the coast of Marseille that lay 40 meters underwater. Thousands of artifacts were recovered and taken back to the Borley Museum and the Roman Docks Museum of Marseille.
That's super interesting. So it was a Roman shipwreck then? And it was taken back to a sort of like Roman shipyard museum?
Maybe. The article I was reading was a little sparse on the details of it, but if it was the 3rd century BC, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, that does indeed line up.
Then, in 1954, the Calypso went out on a voyage to find oil and discovered the rich oil field in the Persian Gulf, which had huge economic influence and implications for the surrounding area, as you could imagine.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But to get into the more well-known exploits of the Calypso, let's back up to the summer of 1953. The Calypso is being used to test new underwater cameras and electronic flashes that made it possible to photograph deep water animals and really pushed the boundaries of underwater exploration. And this testing and development would kind of be the main springboard that would make Jacques Cousteau so famous. Because in 1956, the film The Silent World was released. And this film is an adaptation of Cousteau's book, which shares the same name. They both detail the experiences of an oceanographer and the research that they do, and scuba diving. And this film won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, and it won an Oscar.
Yeah, dang.
Yeah, so this was this was Cousteau's breakout into his career in media.
Okay, kind of what led to him being like even without me really knowing who the guy was, I had heard his name before. So, kind of what led to him being at least a somewhat common household name.
Yeah, he is obviously a very gifted researcher and scientist, but I'd say he was also, you could call him a science communicator. You might call someone like Bill Nye the Science Guy a science communicator, or Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Okay.
But like I said, also a very gifted researcher. So, because of this film, The Silent World, Jacques Cousteau was now famous, and his ship, Calypso, was now famous. And this started a whole series of scientific cruises, studies, and expeditions that would require further modifications to Calypso. So she received submersibles, a helicopter.
Yo.
This on top of her huge crane and bristling antennas and the signature bulbous bow observation deck. This made Calypso a very unique looking ship.
Yeah, I'll say, dude, good God. You've got like mini submarines hanging off the side, helicopters landing on the fucking back, like a billion antennas up front, and then you're like, yeah, welcome to my MTV crib. Come look at the fucking observation bubble below decks. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. After the success of his film and a couple others that followed, Cousteau starred in many television programs, but most notably for us Americans, there is The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And I like the way that this article published by the Cousteau Society, they put it as, quote, Calypso was the leading actress of The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, end quote. So Calypso sailed all around the world, as you might imagine, from the Indian Ocean to Antarctica, and even sailing up the Amazon River. And she became just a juggernaut international symbol of oceanographic research and conservation.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, the choice of the word juggernaut just makes me think of it like like rolling up the Amazon, throwing out depth charges, just like seeing the fish that get catapulted into the air. Like, just a very like militaristic approach to science.
They're just shooting fish with rifles just to see what happens.
Oh, dude, there's some sort of my dad used to like cry laughing reading this thing that was like stupid science awards, there was like a sort of award given out each year for like a bunch of scientific experiments that were just fucking dumb and didn't prove anything. And I remember one in particular that just had him like cackling for hours was an experiment that was, I'm hazy on the details, but the gist of it was how long did it take for our researchers to piss off a U.S. Marine by slapping him with increasingly heavy objects? So it was just like, I mean, yeah, we find out that like U.S. Marines tend to react unfavorably around like the 3-pound mark, but like who gives a shit?
What was the nationality of these researchers? I'm curious.
Oh, I'm sure it was American. I'm 100% certain of that. But okay. I just thought it was so goddamn funny, the image of like these Marines being brought into a testing room, no idea what's gonna happen, and then the, you know, researcher kind of like hits them with a pillow and they're like, hey, what the hell? And then like a fish like just...
I wonder how they determined pissed off.
Yeah, what was the threshold? Like assaulting the scientists,
right?
But anyway, sorry, side tangent.
Actually, I am glad you brought that up. We'll probably talk about it if we do a Jacques Cousteau dedicated episode. But early in the career of Jacques Cousteau and the Calypso and filming shows and film, Cousteau and his team did have some questionable methods. One of which involved them using dynamite to blow up a school of fish.
No shit. So yeah. My image of the Calypso dropping depth charges up and down the Amazon is like not that far off.
Not that far off.
Oh my god. And suddenly I cut back to remember our episode on Elron. Just the image of them dumping belts of ammunition into the ocean.
Exhausted all of their depth charges. And then asked the other ship for more depth charges, and they wouldn't give it to him.
A kindred spirit. But continue. Questionable methods.
They've since apologized for a lot of these things.
Right.
But
hey, sorry, we nuked a school of fish. Oh shit, that's good.
But anyway, as you might guess, for a ship that sailed all over the world, there were some trials and tribulations and breakdowns and issues, but she made it through all of it for quite a while, and we'll get to that. One incident, which I will return to soon, she was in the Suez Canal, and she was nearly sunk by mistake due to the 1956 Egypt-Israeli conflict, which... Yeah. So we'll get back to that.
Well, but, I mean, I guess if I was, like, in a war zone and I looked over and saw this ship that's got, like, a helicopter, several submarines, apparently sticks of dynamite lying around, like, I might confuse it for a combatant warship. Oh, right. Goodness.
But after her long and harrowing journey, it was 3 p.m. in the port of Singapore on January 8th, 1996. A barge that was in the process of being moved seriously damaged Calypso just as she was about to depart on an expedition up the Yellow River. With her hull full of holes, the mighty Calypso, which had conquered so many challenges over 45 years under Captain Cousteau, keeled over and sank.
Damn. Did the helicopter go with it, though? That's what I want to know.
If I had to guess, probably.
Yeah. Also, they probably didn't permanently have one parked there. I love the image of this thing traveling the globe with just a helicopter permanently parked on the back. But no, rip. That it gets taken out by like a barge just fucking up.
Yeah, just an accident.
Damn.
Yeah. And it took 17 days to get the ship out of the water after it had sunk.
Man. That's... Yeah. Oof.
So, a good quote from the Cousteau Society. Quote, "Born of war, Calypso has become the messenger of peace and of protecting the water planet for future generations." End quote. Or that's what they said when she sank.
I totally thought their quote for her sinking was just going to be like, shit.
Or damn B.
Oh, man. But no, that is a nice quote. And I mean, honestly, Jesus, like 45 years, did you say? Like,
yeah, just under Cousteau, so not including her service in World War II.
Yeah, that's nuts. Like, I guess I never even really considered that, like, because, you know, it's pretty rare to see, like, a car from, like, the 40s and 50s still running. And it's usually, like, a car that has either been, like, Ship of Theseus, where it's just, like, so many replacement parts that is it the same car anymore? Or
right.
it sat in a barn untouched for, like, 30 of the years. So I don't, like, did they have to replace her engine at all? Like, were there any, like, major retrofits that you read about?
Oh,
well,
I'm
besides
sure.
landing pad and shit, but
I mean, I'm sure there were. It was after all that time, I'm sure things broke. So
yeah,
I don't have a whole lot of details on that, but
right. I mean, that'd be interesting to. I mean, purely just a point of curiosity for me. Like, do you get to a point where, like, the engines are just, like, so fucking big that they're more durable? Or, maintenance on a ship. If you know anything about it, let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that. But, so after she sank, was that kind of the end of Cousteau's journey?
So, Cousteau, well, let me confirm this really quick. The ship sank in 1996, and Jacques Cousteau died in 1997.
Okay, so yeah, he was probably just done. I mean, well, he died, so he was just done. But
well, yes. Yeah, I don't know how he died, but it is interesting that he died so long or so soon after his beloved ship sank. Thankfully, the scientific expeditions of the Cousteau Society still continued, with Calypso's younger sister, Alcyone, who is another Greek figure, which was launched in 1985 and was very much more modern and fancy.
Well, I would hope a bit more purpose-built, too, and not kind of like we turned a Dodge Charger into a fighter jet, kind of.
Yeah. So, in the wake of the Calypso sinking, after it being in so many movies and TV shows, after having literal songs written about it, the world decided that the Calypso needed to be saved. The section of this article that I read on the Cousteau Society website, this section was titled "Calypso Saved" with an exclamation mark, and it just reminded me of Dragon Ball Z, where the narrator is like, "Will Goku be able to defeat Frieza? Will Krillin's life be avenged? Let's find out on this episode of Dragon Ball Z." And then the title of the episode is Frieza Dies.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Just
what
like, whatever will happen to the fucking Calypso? Next article. It's saved.
Calypso saved.
No, that's good.
Yeah. So, brief little tangent. But, so, unfortunately, or interestingly, the Calypso did not technically belong to the Cousteau Society when she was sunk in the port of Singapore. She was actually leased to the society and Jacques Cousteau, kind of a joint thing, by Lowell Guinness, as in the Guinness Stout.
No shit. Stouts were like sponsoring some of their stuff?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and for some more context, Lowell Guinness was also a British captain and a parliament member, so he was just an important person in general. He had some connections with the military. But after her sinking, Calypso was brought back to France and sold to the Cousteau Society for the symbolic sum of 1 franc by Lowell Guinness's grandson and heir.
Oh.
Which is a nice gesture. And
definitely.
And the gesture was kind of ruined by the shitstorm of legal issues this caused. I don't know a whole lot of details about this, but apparently there were problems with selling a ship for 1 franc. So there was some legal negotiation that went on for quite a while.
Man, that's so fucking dumb. It's like,
yeah,
it's obviously him being like, yeah, we leased this ship to your father, or not your father, but to Cousteau. And like, yeah, it technically wasn't like his, but everybody knew it as Cousteau's ship. And like, he accomplished such great things for it. We technically have to sell it to you. So $1.
Yeah.
And then immediately the lawyers are like, actually.
Actually.
God.
Yes. So, despite that, after some talking it over, the Cousteau Society was finally recognized as the owner of the vessel and had full rights to undertake her restoration to bring her back after her demise. And the restoration began on October 12th, 2007. So, the restoration efforts are ongoing to this day. They've been it's been touch and go.
I just like, how fucking hard did this barge hit the thing?
Okay, so yeah, the barge hit it and it sank, and it took 17 days to recover it. And then for a long time, it was just sitting unmaintained and rotting because of these legal issues.
Goddamn lawyers, dude.
Yeah. So that's a bummer. But they are making progress. The ship has been labeled as a, quote, boat of heritage interest, end quote, by the French Maritime and River Heritage Foundation. So we do have some investment and interest in outside interest in restoration.
Well, that's good. Can always help with monetary concerns in that regard. So,
right. So, that's basically the history of the Calypso, Jacques Cousteau's famous ship. I have a few more things to circle back on, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And also, I like how I started this episode being like, we're getting back to real naval shit. And then it's like, well, it was a mine layer, but then it immediately became... but no, still, that is super interesting. And I mean, honestly, we're more about just boats in general than specifically naval stuff. So, yeah, no, good for... Is it Cousteau, right?
Cousteau.
Cousteau.
Yeah.
Wait, hold the fuck on. Hold the fucking phone.
Okay.
Is that the name of the fucking big fat chef from Ratatouille?
It sure is. I just realized that.
Oh my god, holy shit. Now my mind's eye of all of these marine expeditions has changed.
I don't think his first name is Jacques.
Okay.
To be fair. I don't think his name is Jacques Cousteau.
God, just... Oh. The fuck?
Cousteau trying to scuba dive, and then Remy is fucking helping him scuba dive.
Oh man, Ratatouille has to involve itself in like everything I do. I swear to God.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
I don't know why, but like, I have seen Ratatouille like 4 times in the past calendar year, and none of those 4 times have been my choice. It's just been like, I'm hanging out with Anna and her friends, and they're like, ooh, we're drinking wine. What would be a fun movie to watch? Oh, I know. Ratatouille's funny. It's a meme. Let's do that. And like another time was like my brother and I hanging out, and we just kind of like put something on in the background. We ended up watching it. But Anna and I also call our cats rats. And so when they're stealing food, we call them Ratatouille. For reference, I have all black cats, and they're very cute, but they are glorified raccoons.
A little menacing.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I hope you're adjusting to your new life of Ratatouille. Well,
I'm haunted by it.
but I wanted to circle back really quick to the Suez Canal incident.
Right.
I couldn't find much info about this incident specifically on the websites I was looking at, but I can tell you about the Suez Crisis, which I knew nothing about until I did research for this episode.
I remember my dad mentioning it like once or twice growing up, but outside of that...
Yeah, and I'm surprised I'd never heard of this, and I'll explain it and you'll understand why. So, the Suez Crisis began on October 29th, 1956. And basically what happened was Israel invaded Egypt in an attempt to gain control of the Suez Canal. And this was in response to the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser, who is someone I've definitely heard of before, but maybe didn't know. But this Egyptian president nationalized the canal for Egypt. So the Israelis, backed by French and British forces, attempted to retake it.
Interesting.
And we kind of touched on this earlier, but my guess for what happened with the Calypso in the Suez Canal was that the Egyptians saw a former British minesweeper and naturally thought that she was still under the service of the Royal Navy.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's still like a stretch, but I guess especially if you're not like, if you weren't like super up to date on the exploits of the Calypso, you could just be like, damn, that's definitely a military vessel.
Yeah. So, and on top of that, this is 1956, which is not super long after Cousteau had acquired the ship. So it probably, some of its more exotic modifications might not have been in place yet, and it might have looked just like an ordinary British minesweeper.
Right.
But that's what's going on with that. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, that's... I am also surprised that I didn't know more about that, but it does, now that you mention it, like the Israeli invasion of Egypt does ring a bell.
Yeah, this article I was reading, it was a tense time in general, but they were saying that some historians are surprised that this incident didn't lead to nuclear war, because it's a big deal.
Right. Well, I mean, in the 50s, when did the USSR test their first bomb? Was that 49? Yeah. Not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in the 50s. I don't know which year, but actually, I should probably check that.
I was gonna say, I thought it was the 60s. Because JFK was president.
Yeah.
Unless...
okay. 62.
Right.
All right. Don't listen to me. Well, I'd like to close on some fun Calypso trivia.
Okay.
So, as mentioned before, I thought of this topic because of the song Calypso by John Denver. Apparently, John Denver and Jacques Cousteau were friends, and John Denver was inspired to write the song after he was invited to sail with Cousteau in 1974.
Huh. So he just got
Yeah.
to vibe out on the Calypso for a while.
Yeah, he was just a fan. And it's very sweet. John Denver, gave all of the royalties of the song to the Cousteau Society.
That is very sweet.
Yeah. Then the rest of these are mostly kind of, well, the next fact, the Calypso contributed to NASA's space program, kind of indirectly, by being a important part of the Conshelf submersibles project. And what the Conshelf were, there were three of them. They were submersible pods that were semi-permanent underwater laboratories that could house quote-unquote oceanauts. And it was basically a little house underwater equipped with all the standard modern luxuries of the time. And the number ranges depending on which one you're talking about and which experiment it was, but 2 people have lived in them for an extended period of time. And then there was once where they put basically an entire village into one of these underwater labs.
That's super wild.
Yeah. And Calypso contributed by towing these things to their locations.
Oh.
And how this connects back to NASA, long story short, the training that the oceanauts received prior to living in these pods, NASA has adopted and still used today to train astronauts for being in, 50 square feet for months on end.
Yeah. No, I hadn't even thought of that, but that would make a lot of sense. It's like, hey, once we actually get you up there and you're like, in the International Space Station or what have you, it's going to be cramped as hell for a long time.
Yep. Next, for my Trekkies out there, my Patrick Stewart stands, the captain's yacht of the Enterprise D on Star Trek The Next Generation was named Calypso by the actor Patrick Stewart.
That's also
yeah, that's pretty sick.
It is.
And he also gave the name Cousteau to the captain's yacht on the USS Enterprise E, which is the second ship that they use in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah, so pretty on the nose with the reference, but still.
Yeah, that was a Wikipedia fact, and I was like, I took it with a grain of salt, but then it said that he named the other one Cousteau, and I was like, that can't be a coincidence.
Right. Well, and I mean, like, the Star Trek thing was always, they were scientific vessels more than anything, so I think Cousteau and the the Calypso were very much in that same vein of what the future world of Star Trek was trying to show us.
Right. And my final fact, NASA astronaut Sunita Williams gave the name Calypso to the third Boeing Starliner space capsule, which is used in the Commercial Crew Program. So, I'll explain what those two things are. The Starliner space capsule is basically those kind of conical cheese wedge shaped kind of things that the astronauts come back down to Earth in.
Okay.
With the big round heat shield.
Right.
And the Starliner space capsule is a very fancy and modern one, which is reusable up to 10 times with a 6-month turnaround, which is pretty neat. And the
6 months downtime for going up through the atmosphere and back ain't too bad.
Not too shabby. And these are used for the Commercial Crew Program, which is a commercial service which provides rotations for astronauts going to and from the International Space Station. And what's interesting about this program is that it's contracted. It's not NASA funded or federally funded. I mean, I'm sure it gets some money from the feds, but it's basically supposed to be a space Uber.
Oh, that's kind of crazy that a space Uber exists, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's what I've got on the RV Calypso, the ship of Jacques Cousteau.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was very informative. I now have the image of the fat chef from Ratatouille bombing fish out of the water. So at the very least, I've gained that.
Right.
But it's also it's good to see those sort of like scientific projects and things like that gain not only like mainstream acceptance, but like mainstream fame and support.
Yeah. Hopefully they get her restored soon and she can continue her journey, or at least make spiritual, crowd pleasing journeys. I don't know.
Right. And I mean, like, worst comes to it, fix her up the best you can and slap her in a museum.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be dope if just the Great Hall of the museum is just the boat.
Yeah. Kind of do a tour of, like, all the things they discovered with it.
Right.
Have a little, like, fish dynamite game. For the kids, The
kids love it. But yeah.
All right. With that, I suppose we'll sort of move through the ending motions. What are some things you've been doing outside of the world of naval/boat history?
I think I'm going to buy a place.
No shit.
Here in St. Louis.
Hell yeah. I know in the past you had mentioned possibly moving around, but you're thinking of crashing here a while longer?
Yeah, this place is owned by a family friend of ours, and it's in a part of the city that I really like. It's a 2-story split up into 2 units, so I could live in one half and rent out the other, and possibly keep it and keep renting it out after that.
Yeah. Oh, is this the one you showed me a while back?
Probably.
Okay. Hell yeah, then that's a gorgeous place.
Yeah. So it's not set in stone yet, but I think I'm going to do it. I think it's a really cool place.
Yeah, well, congratulations, dude. Buying a house is, I mean, even starting the process is exciting.
Yeah. And what's going on with you?
Well, I've been saying that my wife pressured me into it, but in truth, it was kind of my idea. We now have a 3rd cat. What's the lad's name? He is also a black cat, and his name is Obsidian.
Ah.
For reference, dear listeners, all of my cats have O names. We have Oliver, and then our second cat who's passed away was Otto. Then currently we have Ozymandias, and now Obsidian.
I remember thinking, what are other O names?
Well, there's a demon in Magic the Gathering named Ormondal the Profane Prince, and I was advocating for that one, but Anna wasn't a super big fan, so we also thought of Odin, but decided that he would have to grow up to be like an absolute unit of a cat in order for that to fit. Let's see. He was very, very vocal on the ride home, so we considered Orpheus.
Okay.
He likes to sing. We were told that he was the last one to be adopted of a pretty big litter. And I asked how big, and they said 8, I think. So we considered Octavius. Like, we've been through all the O names, you know. So, but yes, he's very sweet. This is actually his first day at home.
Aw.
Yeah, he's currently sheltering in Anna's office, and has been hissed at by both of the older boys, but they'll come around.
Very cool.
All right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very, very much for tuning in to the Salty Siren podcast. Again, we're your hosts, David Bradbury.
And I'm Jack. And I'd like to thank Colin Drown at Colin_Drawn for our lovely cover art, and Joe Koziak for mixing and mastering the intro and outro.
Of course. They're both the homies. Send them all of the love and hopefully business that you can. They're great guys. And thank you for listening.
Bon voyage. Oh, Johnny, Johnny, call and hear the ancient song of sailors long forgone and sailors still to be. A sweet and solemn tune spoke gently by the tide. Oh, Johnny, Johnny, fall, join the song.